Hello, and welcome back to my channel. I wanted to talk to you today about fall, because now that it is mid-September, now is the perfect time to curate the perfect list of fall type reads, whether that be dark, eerie, scary, or whether that's kind of back to school feeling, whether that's, however you take on it. I have recently curated what I think is my perfect fall TBR. And I also have a couple recommendations for you. So today I'm going to be talking about a total of 10 books, 6 of which I plan to read within the next couple months, just to fit in with the outdoor air. And then a couple books that I want to recommend to you guys that I can attest to and say that they are good for this time of year. So I'm going to break this down into a couple categories. I'm going to talk about a few books that are classics or modern classics, 2 books that I think are a little bit scary, but I'm not talking horror books or like Stephen King or anything outwardly scary, I don't think, but to me they're scary. And then I want to talk about one nonfiction that I've been working on for a while, but I think I just need to pull the trigger and finally finish it. And then the last 4 books are going to be recommendations to you. So that's how I'm breaking this down. So let's get right into the classics and modern classics. In the classics and modern classics category of this video, I have 3 different books that I wanted to talk about. The first one is The Turn of the Screw. And as I noted in my last video where I showed that I attained this for a haul, that cover is so cool. And the instant that I saw that cover, I knew that I had to read it, probably in October, but definitely sometime this fall. So what The Turn of the Screw is this was written in 1898, and it is kind of a gothic horror novel. So I guess I could have put this in the scary category, but I thought it fit better with the classics, because this is definitely a well-known title. But it kind of has like an eerie atmosphere and psychological ambiguity. It is about a governess who, the 2 children that she watches over, she believes that they are being haunted by 2 ghosts. And the ambiguity comes in where, as you're reading it, I guess you can't really tell whether the ghosts are real or whether this woman is losing her mind. So in a way, you just don't really know. So I guess I'd like to see what I think, whether I think the ghosts are real or whether I think she's just crazy. So I guess through this book, I will kind of look at the thin line between reality and illusion. So I think that this will be a very fun and pretty quick read for spooky season. The Secret History by Donna Tartt. It was written in 1992, so it is a more modern classic look. This book is incredibly popular with people my age on the internet, and so I have to figure out what they think is so great about this book. I started it a little while ago, so I have gotten about halfway through, but this is a story set in some eerie college in Vermont, and it's set around mainly this group of incredibly pretentious and eccentric students who are studying Greek under a really pretentious and eccentric professor. And so as they are studying the classics, they kind of start to turn a little bit darker, and this book is supposed to kind of follow their psychological kind of downturn. And so in the very first sentence even, you're introduced to what these kids end up doing. So the first line is this: "The snow in the mountains was melting, and Bunny had been dead for several weeks before we came to understand the gravity of our situation." So they end up killing their friend Bunny, and so then you go back a couple months and you are walked through their minds as they come to the conclusion of we are going to kill Bunny, and then following through and doing so. But the main thing that people like so much about this book is the dark academia vibes. So it's just kind of a fall book in the way that you know, it's dark and academic and they're studying the classics. So I think a lot of people like this book for the vibes. So it is widely accepted as a highly fall book. So that is A Secret History. Also a modern classic is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This one is tentatively on the list because I don't know if I'm gonna have time to get through every single one of these books, because I also have other books that I need to read for like a book club that I'm in with the library or just other things. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get to every single one of these books. So if I don't get to all of them, this one is probably the one being put on the back burner, because Cormac McCarthy, even though he's widely accepted as one of the great American authors, his books kind of give me the heebie-jeebies. I read No Country for Old Men by him earlier in the year, and it's just a little too brutal, a little too bloody. The way that Cormac McCarthy writes is in really simple sentences. You know, he doesn't use quotation marks. I don't know how much I enjoy Cormac McCarthy's writing, but I know that The Road is a really big book that I probably should read so that I can get myself involved in some literary conversation. So this is a book that I think I should read, but I don't know how much I'm gonna like it. It is a post-apocalyptic story about a boy and his father, and I think that they are just kind of walking along this road, and it's supposedly very bleak and very dark, and usually I don't like things that are bleak and dark. So as you can see, I'm pretty hesitant about this one. But Cormac McCarthy is really big and really good, so I have to see if I like this one better. Getting into the books that I believe are going to be a bit scarier than I usually like is Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. This one won the Nobel Prize, I think, fairly recently. I could totally be wrong on the year on that, but this book supposedly is very good. And I think that this is more something that I would like because it's not outwardly scary, but it still kind of touches on mysterious, scary themes. So what this is it kind of blends together literary fiction, mystery, you know, kind of like thriller, ecological thriller, and supposedly dark comedy. And it's supposed to be a murder mystery set in rural Poland. It is set around this woman who is a recluse, and she, you know, really has a passion for astrology and I guess like animal rights. But suddenly bones start showing up in her front yard, and so everyone suspects that she is killing people and animals. She's killing things. But I guess throughout the story, it's kind of pieced together who is killing all these things and putting them in her yard. I don't really know, obviously, because I haven't read it yet. But I guess it's supposed to kind of be like a mystical take on maybe animals fighting back against their own injustice. I don't really know how to describe this one, but I think that this will be a good touch of horror for me without being outwardly horrific. So, Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. This is 2666. This is probably the most outwardly scary book I will ever read because scary things are not in my genre zone, but this book is supposed to be an absolute magnum opus of Hispanic work. And it is a widely sprawling book based on the size, and it's supposed to blend together kind of mystery and history and psychological thriller and kind of like investigating a set of murders set around a border town called Santa Teresa. And it's a blend of, I think it's 5 different kind of narratives set around 5 different main characters, kind of across continents and across decades, I believe. I could be wrong because I haven't read it yet, but there's a German author, a New York journalist, but they all of the stories converge around these set of murders in this border town. Allegedly, this is very dark and very bleak and, kind of hard to sift through. So usually these are topics that I probably don't enjoy very much, but to break out of my typical genre zone, I think that this would be a good read for scary times. But it explores like violence and evil and obsession, and supposedly it is incredibly well written. I will see what I think. I'm a little intimidated by this one though, but hopefully I like it. And the last of the books that I think thematically I need to read for this time of year is Stalingrad. This is a nonfiction work simply about the Battle of Stalingrad. And I started this a couple months ago because I thought that it would be nice to have a fiction and a nonfiction book going at the same time. But I have read many fiction books and only gotten that far into it, because why would I choose to pick up a nonfiction book when I have the choice of picking up a fiction one? But I think I need to actually settle down and finally read this, because this is an incredibly well-researched book, kind of exploring both sides of the battle, not just one. And I think that going from fall into winter, I really need to read this book. Also, I am doing a challenge with my local library, and one of the prompts that I need to read a book for is a book with a subtitle, and this book has a subtitle. So that is just one more reason why I actually need to sit down and read this book. But I am very big on modern world history, really big on world wars. Stalingrad, this is something I'm very interested in, and I can't believe that I haven't just sat down and read it. So. And now I wanted to talk about books that I have read that I think fit into this time of year. A lot of the books that I read, don't necessarily need to be read during a certain time of year, but these four specifically, I just think are perfect to read in the fall. So first off, The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is one of the only more modern authors that I really think is valuable and I really think speaks to me. This is, at its core, this is just about a butler, and he's taking a drive across the countryside for a couple days to go talk to a woman that he used to know and used to work with. And he's just reflecting on his life and his career and his values, and just the way that this is written, that the storyline of this could be incredibly dull because it's just one man reflecting. That's the whole story. But the way that Ishiguro writes about this is it's so powerful, because the story of a butler, and a butler's morals is probably something that I never would have much considered had I not read this, but this is easily my favorite Ishiguro and one of my favorite books, because I think the reflective tone on this is done so masterfully. And also by Ishiguro, and this is probably his most popular work, at least with people of my age. This is about, it's a slightly mysterious, not boarding house, kind of like boarding school for these children that have kind of a mysterious background and lifestyle, because they don't know really who their parents are, and they don't really know what they're doing there or why they're being raised in the way that they are. And it just quietly leads you in to this really interesting study on humanity. This is a science fiction work, but it's a really subtle science fiction. So, if you're trying to try out a new genre, I think that this one does do a good job of blending normal human story with a little bit of science fiction to, pull out more human concepts, if you know what I mean. But Never Let Me Go, very good. And I'm not reinventing the wheel with this list. Obviously, you cannot talk about fall books without talking about Frankenstein. This is one of the biggest fall-time classics the world has ever seen. this is about a man who creates a monster. And, you know, this is another one that just really studies humanity in a way that it uses science fiction to pull out more human topics. It's not science fiction just to be sciencey. You know, it uses those aspects to make things more human in a more exaggerated format. This book, the Frankenstein's monsters point of view, like monologue, is one of the greatest, you know, monologues I have ever read in literature ever. That is so beautiful and so human, and from the voice of a monster and something ugly, beautiful. The rest of it, I have to say, was a little bit dreadful because it was just Dr. Frankenstein going, oh, my life is so bad. My life is so bad, over and over and over again. That was a little bit dreadful, but for the monster's point of view alone, Frankenstein is a must-read for this time of year. And fall time is also a great time of year to get into a little psychology, especially psychology that views the world in a negative light. Jean-Paul Sartre, I think, French. He wrote The Wall and Other Stories. This is a collection of, I believe it was like 5 or 6 short stories, and the whole thing together is about 150 pages. This one I recommend not to everybody, because this is a pretty twisted read. Every single character in every single one of these stories is like the pinnacle of the worst person you can possibly think of. And anything problematic that a person could think, these characters think it to a large degree. So if you're off-put by things that are off-putting, I wouldn't read this. But to people who do want to kind of study the mind of people who think differently than them and people who have a really negative and evil view on the world, this is a really interesting one. My favorite one was the first one, The Wall. And it is about a man who is set up to be executed against a wall by a firing squad. And it just kind of thinks about death, you know, and the psychological, like, impending doom of what is going to happen to him. Incredibly interesting. The rest of the stories are just kind of about terrible people. Especially the last one, it's the longest one. And that, it's about a kid from being a baby until being, I think, 18 years old. And at every stage and phase of his life, he is the absolute worst person to ever live. You know, he reads Sigmund Freud and has some enlightenment. You know, he has really anti-Semitic thoughts, and he believes that he's not real, but then he comes to the conclusion that he is real because he's so anti-Semitic that he has to be real if he hates something so much. So based on the couple sentences I've just said, this is a really weird one and definitely not for everybody. But psychologically, I think that this is good for fall time if you're into weird psychology. So those are 4 books that I would recommend you read this time of year. But if you're a person who likes to read seasonally, or, you know, is someone who's a bit of a mood reader, and the mood outside is the changing of the seasons, the mood outside is bleak and getting colder, I think that these 10 books, whether the 6 that I haven't read yet or the 4 that I have read, these 10 books are a really good set of books that I believe fit the feeling of what is happening outside. So whether you're putting on a sweater and crunching on leaves, or whether you're going back to school, I think these 10 books, I just wanted to talk about them with you. So thank you so much for watching. I will probably post another video next weekend, so I will see you next weekend. Cheers.